Marvel's first family comes home, but how do we do it? Marvel has done its deal with Fox, which of course obviously means it's getting X-Men back, but it also means it now gets distribution to Fantastic Four back. Now, it is slightly complicated because Fox wasn't actually producing the films. They only had the exclusive distribution, but it was another company, I forget the name of, actually has the production rights. But Disney is obviously going to get right in with them, put pressure on them, and possibly even lend resources to them, or just buy the remainder of the rights outright. Whatever it takes, they will do what they need to do to get Fantastic Four.
Yeah, I remember hearing at the 11th hour, they're like, yeah, they're getting X-Men back, they might not get the Fantastic Four back. And I was like, well, I certainly don't care anymore.
Well, I mean, there is that. But I mean, they get distribution rights to Fantastic Four, and obviously they're planning to, because Disney mentioned Fantastic Four in its own press release. So regardless of whether there is a separate deal that has to be done for that to happen, they want it to. They called out the franchise specifically. So now we're in a situation where the Fantastic Four needs to be integrated into the MCU. And I'm done talking about doing the X-Men in the MCU for a while because I did like 3 videos in a row on it. So I brought Ryan over to talk about the Fantastic Four, what could work, what might not, what other things that are tied up in that license could we now get, what are some ways to do them. And I'll say I don't have a lot to say about how I think they should integrate the family itself, because I kind of default to the series of videos that Movie Bob did with his speculation, and I haven't thought of a better idea. I'll tell you about that in a little bit if you're not familiar. But do you have a general notion on how to get the Fantastic Four into the MCU?
I have some ideas, but ultimately, I kind of want to just frame like why this deal was exciting to me, because I've heard a lot of people, and again, like we've discussed this at times, like the X-Men. There were a lot of hits or misses with the X-Men franchise, but ultimately, if Fox kept X-Men, I would be fine with that, because it looked like they were doing interesting things with that franchise, at least with the spin-offs, with Deadpool and New Mutants and things like that.
There was gas left in the tank for them with that.
There was. And I'm also a person who, it's interesting seeing the X-Men cross over with the larger Marvel universe, but that's never been something that I've needed to see, because they're so... When you bring the X-Men into the larger Marvel universe, it opens up a lot of questions. It's like, why are these people feared and scrutinized for the way they are when other characters might not be, who have superpowers? There's just like, it asks a lot of questions that then people need to answer.
Well, not to mention, X-Men has such a huge cast of characters anyway, it doesn't need all that other stuff to be able to be as huge and expansive.
Right. But the Fantastic Four, which is my favorite Marvel property, this is one that I have wanted Marvel Studios to get its hands back on. Not because I necessarily want to see them interacting with the Avengers or with Spider-Man.
Okay.
Crossovers are great. I would love to see them. Who wouldn't? But the reason I wanted Marvel Studios to get them was because I trust Marvel Studios to do a good Fantastic Four movie. Ultimately, that's what I want. If you can cross them over with Spider-Man or the Hulk, awesome. If not, just give me a good movie, because I still say the best Fantastic Four movie to date has been The Incredibles. And then second to that is the Roger Corman that wasn't even theatrically released. It was basically just completed to fulfill a contract, and then tried to hide away forever. But thank you, bootleg copies and fan service. The Tim Story ones were mediocre.
They had a couple of basically they had a good Johnny Storm, they had a good Ben Grimm, and that was kind of about it.
Right. And I never bothered to see the Josh Trank Fantastic Four one. I just...
No.
And it wasn't that there were a couple of things going on with that. One, I looked at it and said, that doesn't look like my Fantastic Four. It doesn't look like... but it looks like a bad movie, but also it doesn't look like it respects the source material. Getting into the question of how do they integrate it, I mean, I would love it if they could make them the first family, the premier group that debuted before Iron Man, before the Hulk, before Spider-Man, because that's how they did it in the comics. But that's not possible practically. I mean, like, they could contrive a way where they existed in the past, like when S.H.I.E.L.D. was first forming, but the public doesn't know about them. Maybe they've been off in the negative zone or something like that. But ultimately, that aside, I just want a good movie. And they can make differences, because I like Ant-Man in the comics. Hank Pym and Scott Lang, the characters who inhabit Ant-Man. The movie Ant-Man is, generously speaking, it would be generous to say that it is representative of those characters in the comics. Which is to say, there's a spark of truth, but like the characters are very, very different. The situations are incredibly different, but I still love that movie because it felt like it was entertaining, and it was treating the characters with respect and giving me a good product. So even though it was different, and I was like, that's not my Hank Pym, but this is fine. It's.
I mean, given what Hank Pym has been in the comics, I was perfectly fine with what we got.
I also understand the logic for why they wouldn't do Hank and Janet, as they did. So they could go younger. They could say the Fantastic Four just get their powers in their first movie or whatever, that they're a younger generation than this version of Tony Stark and this Thor and everything. Like, they're kind of like a new breed of superheroes. It wouldn't be my ideal choice, but if the movie was good, I would probably be happy with it. And again, sorry, well, go ahead.
To my way of thinking, there's basically 3 ways to integrate them.
Okay.
There is introducing them and having them get their powers now, which unfortunately robs them of a lot of their appeal from the comic books, which is that they are the most legacy characters short of Captain America.
Right.
And you lose that if you have them get their powers now. But again, if you can come up with a good story. But the other problem with that is, especially if you go younger in the casting, is it rings the bell of Fan Four Stick. And I know nobody went to see it, but I think they're still going to want to avoid ideas that sound like they were similar to the few ideas that thing had. Option number 2, you bring them in from an alternate reality where they were the first family in superpowered whatever, in whatever reality they were in. That's doable, but I've kind of done my own piece about why I don't want multiverse stories in the MCU. I don't particularly enjoy them inherently, but I also think that it is a level of excessive complication that is going to, if not immediately, fairly quickly alienate the mainstream audience, and it's going to be something that is going to bring a premature box office death to this genre, trying to integrate that. The third option, which is basically what Movie Bob's suggestion was, and I will put a link down in the description for his first video where he outlined this part, because he did several on how he thought they should do the Fantastic Four.
Product placement.
Woo! So basically his idea was they are from the 60s.
Okay.
And you give them the same origin in the 60s, but when they, where Reed Richards steals his own experimental rocket ship to go into space to study the cosmic rays, but when the cosmic rays that give them their powers hit them, they also knock them forward about 60 years into the future.
Okay.
So what that means is they do have a legacy, because like his suggestion was initially you have them crash and like you have like a Richards Technologies or something symbol on the shuttle, and somebody who's been around for a while who would know that, like Tony Stark, goes, no, to recognize that these people have been around, but they're only now just arriving with their powers. So but it allows them to maintain what is admittedly a very dated family dynamic that they were originally built with. And I think in a lot of ways that's been part of the problem with not only translating them to film, but why a lot of the more modern comics with them have felt weird, because they're either trying to update the family dynamic and it no longer feels like the Fantastic Four, or you stay true to the original family dynamic and it's so dated. But if you actually bring them, all of them, up forward in time, you can maintain that dynamic, and it's not like weird, and it's antiquated in a justifiable way. And it also creates an interesting dynamic where folks like Sue and Ben Grimm can benefit from things like, the whole, I know it sounds blunt, but with Ben, with the body positivity, like you are more than what you look like, and with Sue, female empowerment and all that, whereas all of a sudden Reed will find that his father's knows best patriarch guy is not in fashion anymore. And so there's all the dealing with that. And I don't want to get into a ton of details of sort of because he also laid out plot. But as a general starting premise, I like that a lot.
I would be fine with that. And I kind of thought, having them start in the 60s and kind of jump forward in time, or having them flung into an alternate, like a negative zone type of thing, and find out that they've been fighting Annihilus and his way for the last 10 years or something or whatever, and they finally make their way back or whatever. And basically you just create they've been lost in space for a little while. And then you can have allusions to their interactions with the Kree or the Skrulls or something in the Super Skrull. And that could just be seated sort of foundation that's stuff in their backstory.
If you were going to do, I would definitely prefer negative zone to the multiverse sort of thing, because especially since we haven't established the negative zone in the MCU yet, you can mess with how it works. If they were kind of fluxing in and out of different points in the universe as we know it, you could have some allusion to they did something that impacted the Kree 100 years ago, or impacted this 50 years in the future, but because the negative zone is all this weird interweaving in and out of our reality. As
we're talking about this though, I see a problem.
Okay.
Captain Marvel.
Well, we don't know how that works yet, so that's kind of a presumptive problem.
It is a presumptive problem, but we know that her solo movie in 2019 takes place in the 90s.
Yes.
She'll go off into space, presumably to fight the Skrulls, and then she comes back for Avengers 4.
We don't know if she goes off into space. That's very much speculation. We know it's set in the 90s. We know it involves the Skrulls. I've actually been assuming that it was largely Earth set, and it's going to be more because Nick Fury's also appearing in it, and that it's the Skrulls because that allows you to go more espionage because they can hide who they are. I was not presuming a ton of space stuff except to justify Marvel and how she gets her powers. Now, that's not to say she couldn't go into space. I, for one, wasn't presuming that.
Okay, I kind of was. I mean, I guess she could be in a coma, or they could do. I don't know. They could do something, but they're going to have to...
They could do the whole Avengers number 200 thing and have her go off and come back and give birth to her own rapist. That went over so well in the comics.
Let's call that option C.
Go ahead and Wikipedia that, folks, if you want to read about something that was... What were they ever thinking? Yeah. Avengers 200. It will blow your mind.
Can you believe they made her character an alcoholic in the 90s?
I know, it seems so unjustified.
Yeah.
No, that was earned.
When Tony Stark said, Carol, you got a problem.
Well, hard to blame her.
Yeah. I think I do, if they approached it one of these ways, I think I would be happy because I like the idea that they are kind of another generation. In looking at it this way, they would almost be of Howard Stark's generation.
Yeah, they'd be closer to that at the very least.
At least from the, sort of, that they would have sort of like a Mad Men type of feel. And then, I don't know, part of that, I like that because not just calling them the first family, but there was always kind of an air of dignity about the Fantastic Four, that they were the elder statesmen.
Yeah.
That when something happened in the Marvel Universe that nobody could explain or that nobody was really sure about, they're like, is the Fantastic Four in town? No, they're in space? Okay, I gotta deal with this then.
Yeah, a bit. That's kind of the thing, is we need help. Who do we go first? The Fantastic Four or the Avengers? Well, who's closer?
Right.
Basically.
You just do them a basic an origin story, although I don't think Marvel wanted to do a whole lot of... They wanted to get away from the origin stories.
They kind of said after Doctor Strange, we're done with straightforward origin stories. Yeah. So which I think is one of the things that makes they are of this time and get their powers now angle less likely, unless it's something that they concede in somebody else's movie or in Avengers 4.
Right. We've seen their origin a number of times just in the last 10 years in other movies or other properties. It's not super complicated.
It's not particularly interesting either. How they deal with getting their powers is a little interesting, but the actual origin story is not particularly, and their first big outing as heroes is not particularly interesting either.
No, but I would like to at least once see a scene reminiscent of the cover of their first issue with the giant
mole
monster,
thing. Yeah.
No Man's monster coming out of the street just in the middle of New York. I would love to see that on film. I always thought if they were doing another movie, an interesting thing, because the question I always came up with was, why is Sue on the ship with them? And they've tried to sort of say, well, she's a scientist now, and they kind of try to present. And I've never liked that because it's Reed is the scientist. I understand wanting to give her more agency, but I don't think that was necessarily the way to go. Ben was the pilot, and you could actually explain Johnny having something to do with the mechanics of building the ship or some of the, because he, for being kind of a dumb, flighty jock character, he's actually really good with machines. He was always a gearhead. He was always building cars and stuff like that. You could put him in that.
What I always took Sue's presence on the ship to be, and granted, this is not from having like a deep, intimate knowledge of the original comics, but my own read on it, based off my knowledge of the characters, was she was there because of Reed's hubris. Like, he was so certain that it was perfectly safe. Why wouldn't he take his girlfriend to show off what he can do? Because it doesn't even consider to him that there would ever possibly be a problem.
I would take it even further with that. I would have him propose while they're in the ship, while they're in space, because Reed would think that was the most romantic thing in the world. And, like, you have a scene where he, like, throws the ring at her, and you just see it tumbling through 0G, and just before she grabs it, bam, boom, the ship is hit by these cosmic rays, and they start going through some crap or whatever. And then that's a visual cue later on after the ship has crashed, somebody finds the ring or something. What you do with them then, in terms of bringing them into the larger Marvel universe, like I said, it would be cool to have them crossing over, but I think a lot of people are expecting to sort of see, like, Secret Wars from the 80s, where you've got the best Avengers, the best X-Men, the Fantastic Four, all these people together, and it's like, that can't happen. If that was ever going to happen, it had to. Disney had to buy these guys out half a decade ago.
Yeah.
Because functionally, like, by the time you integrate the Fantastic Four, we're going to need at least two solo movies really before they're in an Avengers movie, I think. And then by then it's like, who is your Avengers? Like, Iron Man, Captain America, Thor. These guys aren't going to be around. Like, they're going to have to recast. It's not going to feel the same. So, and it's the same thing with the X-Men. Like, looking at Avengers versus X-Men, it's like, which groups are you?
I mean, that's the thing. Realize, and he's now said it flat out, even though he said before, wouldn't it be cool? Hugh Jackman is not going to play Wolverine again. No. He's now said that flat out.
Disney wouldn't want him to do.
I mean, and that's the other thing. This was another thing. I kept getting into arguments with people in my comment that they'd be like, he said he'd come back and do it. Like, okay, even if that's true, which it would later turn out no, he wouldn't. But even if it was true, he'd come back twice at the most. They want to sign somebody who's going to be on the hook
6 movies.
For 6 years and 10 movies.
Yeah. Like, he's been playing this part for 19 years.
He's done. It would have been very cool to see his Wolverine interact with some of these characters. That is literally never going to happen.
It's never going to happen. So I'm not concerned about seeing the Fantastic Four in an Avengers movie, like with like all of these things. If it happened, cool, but in terms of crossing over and meeting some of the other Marvel characters, I would like to see them interacting with Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I would like to see them interacting with the Hulk.
Well, I mean, you have to do a thing Hulk fight at some point. You can't not do that.
I would like to see them interact with Doctor Strange.
Yep.
And I would like to see them interact with Black Panther.
Oh, yeah.
With the Hulk as the notable exception, who can't have his own solo movie for a while now, so I'm not sure what they're planning to do with that character and Mark Ruffalo. But the other three that I listed are all relatively new to the MCU in terms of debuting in their own movies just within the last few years. So I'm not worried about those guys like getting out of their contracts before they can start moving in with the Fantastic Four.
So, if I'm being completely honest, I do enjoy the Fantastic Four in comics. I don't really care if they ever show up in the movies. You know who I do care? Doom.
Okay.
I want Doom.
I knew we were going to get to this point.
I want Doom in the MCU so bad. More than that, I want him to be the next big Marvel Universe baddie after Thanos.
It would be dumb for them not to do it that way.
Yeah. Because I know there are already people going, no, you go Galactus after Thanos. Like, no, because it's too much of a repeat. You don't go that. You don't try and one up.
Yeah,
Instead,
reverse that. Doom first, then.
Yes, you go smaller. You deal with a guy who he's only a threat to Earth, but is still a guy that throws everybody off because he's got control of this entire country, which gives him this diplomatic immunity thing, and he rules with an iron fist. He's got all this technology. He does warrant the attention of the entire Earthbound MCU, because honestly, we don't need to pull in the Guardians of the Galaxy for every Avengers crossover following Infinity War. Right. But I want Doom in this universe so bad.
Yes, I agree. They need that, like. Because I was even thinking when I didn't think they would ever get when I didn't think they might ever get the Fantastic Four, I thought the substitute would be Kang or somebody like that, who is.
He's
not Doom.
Okay, no, well,
no one's Doom.
Yeah, nobody is Doom but Doom.
Right, and he'll tell you that.
Yes, and then disintegrate.
Right, and Doom, he taps in it because he is a threat to the Fantastic Four. He's a threat to Iron Man, the Avengers. He's a threat to Doctor Strange, because he kind of works as everything. So. I definitely think he should be the next big bad who can play out a long game over multiple movies, multiple years.
And that's another thing. It plays to his personality to be Machiavellian, and to play the long game, to play a long chess game of moving the pieces around to exactly where he wants them to be. Right. Thanos works for that, and he works for that structurally. So he does allow you to stretch him out over time as well.
Branching off from that, other villains and other characters, because you kind of mentioned what else besides the core family does this kind of buyout lead to. I mentioned Annihilus, the sort of annihilation wave, like the whole negative zone thing. This was the impetus for a comic book series, mini-series, I guess, but more like a maxi-series, like kind of event a couple of years ago that sort of kind of created the renewed interest in the Guardians of the Galaxy. It sort of spun out of this. And I think James Gunn has said that he would like to do something with that, if he could, possibly for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, possibly doing something with Annihilus.
He might get access to Annihilus for that.
He might. I think he was already planning on introducing Adam Warlock. I think he confirmed Adam Warlock in Volume 3.
That's the end already.
Yeah. And I think he could... But, so maybe it seems like Adam Warlock will be the villain, and then he has a heroic turn. We could, but other cosmic characters, this might open the door to characters like, we've seen the Kree, we will have seen the Skrulls, but we mentioned Galactus, but also Silver Surfer. They could finally do a solo. So now, does it make sense to do that before we see Galactus? Not really. So,
I mean, can I be completely honest? I've never cared about the Silver Surfer. And maybe I've just never read the right stories, but he's always felt like a cipher to me, like an overpowered cipher. He feels like a black hole of a character. He's defined by, his responsibilities and his powers, but has very little discernible personality.
It might be. He is a tough character, and I think it will be tough with what they do with Adam Warlock, because I think. It'll be very easy to make those two characters very similar to Vision. And ultimately, my take on Silver Surfer has always been what I think Stan and Jack wanted, is basically he's the Archangel of Death, who has this redemption arc, who basically turns against God.
Well, what I would say is you can't do a Silver Surfer story without Galactus.
Right.
Because if I'm being again, I don't think he's interesting if he doesn't have that whole being forced to do this horrible thing for this massively powerful being thing. So, I mean, maybe the furthest I'd stretch it is you give him his own movie, but it has the tragic ending where to save his own planet, he now goes into servitude of this thing. That's the closest that I would say you should go to giving him a solo movie devoid of Galactus. But it's that relationship that makes him interesting. But then I come back to what I said before. We need to hold off on Galactus for a while.
Right, and I'm still kind of the mind of don't give him a solo movie until he's been introduced with Galactus in a Fantastic Four movie.
Yeah.
And that's probably Fantastic Four number 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So we could be talking 10 years away.
Well, who else we got? The Mole Man. We actually did mention.
Mole Man. The Puppet Master, Diablo.
Not
the Red Ghost and his super apes. Crazy old Russian man with 3 superpowered apes.
Oh dear Lord!
I would buy that ticket. I was going to say the Inhumans.
Well, the Inhumans are stuck on TV now at this point.
Yeah.
And this is another thing that's funny to me, because with some of my X-Men stuff that I put out there, people are like, well, but see, they already introduced the Inhumans? And I'm like, okay, I understand technically this is all part of the same universe. But at this point, the movies and the TV are completely separate entities, because until either Kevin Feige or Ike Perlmutter leaves that position, the two are never going to meaningfully cross over. So the fact that they've done all this mutant-esque stuff with the Inhumans and the TV shows is completely irrelevant to the movies. But it also means that those characters are never going to be seen in the movies either. Which, given what we saw in the TV show, I am fine with that.
Yeah, I was one who, at the outset, thought it would be great to see these things cross over, but having fallen so far behind with the TV watching, even with the Netflix shows, I would kind of watch the movies and have to think, yeah, Agent Coulson is dead in the movie universe.
No, he really is.
He is. Yeah. Like, that was the intention, and they're sticking with that.
But the thing is, it's funny, a lot of, much like themselves, like we talked about initially with how the Fantastic Four is kind of a dated family unit, a lot of their villains are really dated too. Like Mole Man, he's kind of fun, but he's really 60s cheesy.
Sure.
And, well, a lot of them are. Doom is too, but Doom is in a way that works.
Right. Going back to my initial thing is, I want a movie that is just good, it can be different. It doesn't have to be a carbon copy of the comics, because the movies haven't been.
Well, no.
Ant-Man was not based on the comics.
Well,
Guardians of the Galaxy, there was never a comic book version of the Guardians of the Galaxy that looked and sounded like that movie until after that movie came out.
Yeah, it's been to the movie's benefit that they have never directly adapted any specific story.
Right. So if you give me a group dynamic that feels like a generational family, that they're not all 21 years old or whatever they were in Fantastic.
At the very least, they need to be varied ages.
Right. That you have a sense of age and like a gap and everything, with Johnny being the kind of younger kid brother and Sue having to manage him, and Reed as this kind of like elder statesman. And if you make them fun and you make them likable, but above all, what I really want from these movies, you've got to show me something different. And this is ambitious, and the bankability of the franchise would not warrant this at now, but I want Disney to treat the Fantastic Four movie like James Cameron treats Avatar, which is, we need to invent new technology that doesn't exist right now in order to show you what you need to see to experience this. Like $250 million production budget for this, like going crazy.
So that you can really go nuts with things like the negative zone and the notion of them as explorers.
Right. The quantum field, the astral realms that we saw in Ant-Man and Doctor Strange, those are a good start, but
let's dig in.
Yeah. And like a director of photography who really kind of gets like bold and does some crazy experimental stuff. That was what made the comic special, was for 100 issues, Jack Kirby just did stuff that nobody else was doing, that nobody else could even think of. And part of the problem is people have been trying to ape that feeling for so long, and very few succeeded.
That's true. I think, unfortunately, that Marvel's in a slightly unenviable position when it comes to trying to deal with the Fantastic Four, because obviously, trying to do something that is true to the original version of the comics. It wasn't good, but the Tim Story movies were that. Again, they weren't good, but they were those characters more or less, at least on paper, as they were from the comics. Right. And then Fantastic was, let's reinvent these characters as something else. So now there's already a taint on honoring the original and a taint on reinventing. So that puts them in an awkward position where they need to reinvent, but also not reinvent in the way it was already reinvented and didn't work. I'm kind of more interested in what they're going to do with Fantastic Four than X-Men, which is not to say I don't care about X-Men, but for me there's a little bit more of a mourning involved with Disney acquiring X-Men, because I am feeling a little bit of a loss of what else might Fox have done that Disney won't do. Whereas I don't have that kind of hang-ups with Fantastic Four. It's like, do whatever you want. I don't care at this point.
And I'm kind of... My interest and my enthusiasm for the X-Men is not what it was when I was half my age. But certainly I would be curious to see what they would do, because I haven't been wowed by the last couple of solo X-Men movies. I appreciated Deadpool for being something very different, even though it wasn't necessarily to my taste. I like the idea that Bob Iger has pretty much said we're open to keeping that an R-rated franchise that can sort of exist within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as long as we kind of make it clear to our audiences, like, let them know that. And I actually think Deadpool can transition almost seamlessly because of his fourth wall breaker.
Because he's a fourth wall breaker.
Because, like,
he gets away with it.
He can say, hey, are you a different actor who played Colossus? Or, like, something he can...
Wait, I could totally see him in Deadpool 3 turning to the camera. Wait, we're owned by Disney now. Am I still allowed to say this?
Yeah.
Like, he would totally do it. He'd hang a lampshade on it. It'd be fine.
Exactly. And it would be fine. And it would work for that character, and it would be perfect. So I'm not concerned about Deadpool's future in Disney.
I'm not either, but at the same time, like, I still go back to... And I mean, I wasn't expecting Bob Iger to kill Deadpool as a franchise because, aside from the fact that it's very successful, that would have cost him a hell of a lot of audience goodwill.
Oh, sure.
And I think he knew that. But what I will say is Disney won't kill it now, but Disney also wouldn't have made that movie in the first place.
No.
So I am still concerned about...
Yeah, no, you're right. I don't think
where they're going to go.
They never would have taken risks with a movie like Logan or Deadpool or things like that.
But now that they have already been made, maybe they will still do things in those veins.
Right.
But I also can't let go of the fact that they wouldn't have made those movies in the first place.
True.
So, but that's kind of a separate thing. We've now wandered from it. But yes, Fantastic Four, woo, Doom, woo! So that's, I think we'll wrap it up on this one. Ryan, what do you feel like plugging these days?
I've got a number of shows on the Fire and Water podcast. Get them while they're hot, because a lot of them will go on hiatus in 2018. Fire and Water Podcast Network. Find me.
I mean, I plug that anyway because I have a podcast on there too. So what are your thoughts on the Fantastic Four? How do you integrate it into the MCU? What characters should or shouldn't they use from the supporting cast or villains? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Check me out on Twitter at Council of Geeks. Give a listen to the Council of Geeks podcast. That's available on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher Radio. I'm also one half of the Punch Like a Girl podcast, which, along with Ryan's stuff, is on the Fire and Water Podcast Network, fireandwaterpodcast.com.
Outro is never ending.
And until next time, this council is adjourned.